I announced a meetup in Hamburg, Germany today. It's the video that came out before this one. Check it out. So I realized that I haven't talked about like weird futurism stuff in a while, and I thought maybe I should do a video on a concept that's been rummaging around my head for a while. In a highly advanced post-scarcity civilization, don't people have a right to beauty? Now, I am of course talking about aesthetic beauty because very few people would choose to live in a hovel. Even people who are really into cabins are usually really into nice cabins. But I'm mainly talking about human beauty, which is something that does absolutely exist and follows certain rules, like facial symmetry and proportionality. Tastes diverge massively, of course. Different people like different things, but generally speaking, there are a lot of people where a huge proportion of the population would go, yes, that is a beautiful person. Most media we consume features very few normal-looking people. I mean, look at a Hollywood film, even the ugly people are beautiful. Now, some would argue that giving us the ability to alter our appearance, basically at will, would lead to like a monoculture of all people looking the same, but I don't actually think this is going to be a problem. Even with all the people looking beautiful, you still have a vast range of different ways in which people look beautiful, for instance, in media, and the fact that there are so many different tastes will account for a lot of different kinds of beauty. There isn't just the one perfect thing when it comes to taste. Some things are more common than others, certainly, but it's not all the same. We could talk feasibility of making something like this happen, but this is a discussion about the ethics of future technology. It doesn't really make sense to discuss the feasibility of it in this context. This is a thought experiment. So instead, we're just gonna assume that in the future, we will be able, through genetic engineering, to just give people the baseline aesthetic traits of human beauty. And this would be the genetic manipulation of the gamete, but could also be done in adult humans. And it's easy to imagine that this could be possible, but why should we have a right to it? It's well established that physically attractive people, whether they be men or women, have a lot of advantages in life. Aside from the fact that people just like looking at them, they appear more trustworthy, more confident, and more accomplished. This is due to the halo effect, where if you have one aspect of a thing that is comprised of different aspects, and you get a positive impression of that aspect, you will be much more inclined to also just assume that all the other aspects of the thing are positive. So if someone is beautiful, they must also be a nice person. Which is something that a lot of beautiful people who are assholes have taken advantage of. It's a cognitive bias. They're weird. Now, as a society, we've come to a point morally where we believe that everyone should be given the same opportunities as everyone else. We've also come to the conclusion that giving such opportunity to the underprivileged shouldn't come at a significant opportunity cost to those who are not underprivileged. In other words, giving people access to opportunities shouldn't deprive others of access to those same opportunities. Right? You raise people up, you don't pull the others down. I know there's people who disagree with that, but frankly, they're just looking for an excuse to be a self-righteous dickhead, and they're also pretty fringe, so I don't care. Take education, for instance. We know that not everyone will have the same education outcomes, yet we still strive to create systems wherein each individual person can get the best possible outcome for themselves. Which, you know, we're not very good at that, but we're a lot better than we used to be. Of course, education outcomes are extremely complicated, though they primarily correlate with socioeconomics and intelligence. There are a huge amount of other factors as well. The point is, pretty much everyone will agree when you say every individual should be able to achieve the best possible educational outcome for them without being disadvantaged by things outside of their control. And we do regulate the socioeconomic factors for that in most places that aren't the United States. I mean, of course, if you have rich parents, your life as a student and going forward will be easier, sure. But here in Germany, for instance, if you're poor, you just get student loans that don't cripple you for the rest of eternity. They're actually extremely reasonable, and very often you don't even have to pay them back. There's a maximum cap on what you will ever have to pay back, even if you receive multiple times that amount. So we don't take away the financial opportunity afforded by having rich parents, we just give something similar to people who were born into abject poverty, such as myself. I was able to go to uni no questions asked, aside from, like, are your grades good enough? But what if we could also alter the other major predictor of education outcomes, intelligence? Now, I am aware that intelligence is a very nebulous concept, but this is once again not a discussion about details and feasibility, but about ethics. It's a thought experiment. What if we could just raise up the genetic factors that determine the intelligence of a person for those who just don't naturally have those genes coming into life? Shouldn't we, especially in a society where most menial labor is taken care of by machines, give this advantage to all people? I mean, we already do it. We already try to make people as intelligent as possible, because quality of education correlates very strongly with intelligence. It is morally good to make people smarter is also not a statement that a lot of people will disagree with. So if we could use genetic engineering to level the playing field by raising everybody up, shouldn't it be our moral responsibility to do so? Even against the will and consent of the parents, by the way. Of course, you get to determine a lot of things about your child, but like giving it vodka every day so it like remains dumb, even if it could have been smarter because that's a realistic and easy to achieve thing, that's child abuse. If, for instance, you agree that vaccines should be mandatory for children even if the parents don't want them, then you should also agree with this. Then again, you might be an anti-vaxxer, I don't know. We use modern medicine to optimize the way our bodies function all the time, to raise it all up to a certain baseline, to give people the right to health, which in civilized Western countries, poor people also have access to. So if we use genetic engineering to give people the advantages of health, and to give people the advantages of intelligence, shouldn't we also give them the advantages of beauty? Much like better educational outcomes, this is also for the good of society as a whole. Even though if the difference is not that big, but we kind of do like to have beautiful people around us at all times. I mean, of course, your actual attractiveness is as much determined by the way you carry yourself as your physical attractiveness traits. But we also agree that it is good to create an environment wherein people can come to a point where they carry themselves well and with confidence and self-love. Now, you could argue that being good-looking shouldn't be a human right because you don't need it to survive. And you'd have a point. But at the same time, if you believe that the only things people should have rights to is the most basic things we require for survival, you haven't been paying attention. I mean, of course we have a right to food, water, and shelter, but we also have a right to vote and a right to free speech. Those things are not necessary for survival, yet they are still highly enshrined things in our society. Plus, you know, there's still a lot of hungry people in the West, and there's still a lot of homeless people in the West. And let's not even talk about all the countries where, you know, there's even more of those people. I think at this point it's very important to note that the rights that are awarded to the citizens of a country shouldn't necessarily be tied to what that country can provide, because at that point, if you're just an extremely poor country that can't provide certain things for its citizens, you would be making a moral case that those people don't deserve those basic things, and I think that would be a problem. So while we should have a baseline, while we move forward into more productive and wealthy societies, we should raise what that baseline is. And if you're advocating for something like basic income or a right to access to information, you are already doing this. Healthcare not so long ago used to fall under this, and in certain countries still does. So why shouldn't we, in a post-scarcity society, have our need for aesthetics and beauty fulfilled simply because it isn't a basic thing we need for survival? After all, you'll have a lot of people arguing that such a society should also take care of people's needs to have purpose and meaning in their life. Or really, pretty much all other parts of aesthetics that don't have to do with altering the way people look, like being able to live in a house that looks nice. So at that point, if you want to be consistent in your philosophy, you should kind of argue that people also have a right to beauty when it comes to the way they look. And, you know, obviously, it's not the case that people who aren't, like, physically attractive can't fulfill, like, a great, fulfilled life where people find them very attractive, much like poor people can theoretically raise themselves out of poverty. It happens. But they're still at a massive disadvantage that they didn't create for themselves, and so they shouldn't need to be. But still, messing with, like, how beautiful people are and how, like, you know, the facial structure and everything like that, it does kind of give me the creeps, weirdly more so than messing with the intelligence of people. I mean, your intellect is after all a defining characteristic of your personality, while the way you look physically isn't necessarily so much. So maybe it's the vanity that irritates me about this, but it's certainly not only the vanity. And so who knows, right? Maybe if everyone is beautiful, personality will just matter more. But, you know, what about Fringe Cases? I think this was in the first episode of Rick and Morty, where, like, Morty breaks both his legs falling down this cliff. And so Rick goes into the future to get, like, super advanced healing medicine that heals him in a matter of seconds. But in that future, everyone's like young and beautiful because they have perfect genetic engineering, and he's the only old man around, and so he's like this very exotic, interesting specimen, and so he stays there for a while to have sex with I don't know how many women. There's people who are into weird things, fetishes. They exist. And a lot of those fetishes is people who are into physical traits that wouldn't necessarily normally be considered attractive. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I think even if we were all beautiful, we would still have people who choose to have weird traits. Maybe because they're into the idea of, you know, being there for a specific fetish, or maybe just to stand out, like Rick. And frankly, if you're into something weird that doesn't hurt anyone, you should have it. Especially in a highly advanced post-scarcity society with, like, genetic engineering, where there's actually gonna be real furries and stuff. You know, what's the problem? Which at the same time comes back to the idea that pretty much all people are into beauty and having beauty themselves, so why not fulfill this most common of fetishes if you're gonna allow this thing for everyone else also? So by that logic, people should be made to look beautiful. And that is fucking weird to think about. Genuinely, it is really weird. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, especially comment. I'm really curious as to what some other philosophical perspectives might be on this. And share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar, maybe buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit, for all the talk we've had about like aesthetic beauty and stuff, remember that the most important thing that makes you an attractive person is still your personality, the way that you are with others. Aesthetics, the looks, yeah, sure, they're a big, like, trump card in the beginning, but if you're a piece of shit, people will notice, and if you're a very nice person, people will notice as well. And see you around, cunts.